You're listening to SaskScapes, a podcast featuring the stories of arts, culture, and heritage in Saskatchewan. Occasionally, he's been mistaken for a member of the ZZ Top Band. He has been referred to as the Yoda of the hobby. There is no try. Build it he must. I am speaking about today's guest, Ley Ward. Known as the Wizard of Lego, Ley shares his passion for the seemingly childlike toy, which has some very serious applications. Humor, as Ley says, is very serious business. I was touched by how supportive this community is internationally. Lego is fun, Lego is therapeutic, and most of all, Lego is restricted only by your imagination. I'm Kevin Power. Pull up some bricks and enjoy the podcast. I continue podcasting in the Meacham Museum. This time, my guest is the Lego wizard, Ley Ward. I don't know if that is a self-imposed title, or are you officially known as the Lego wizard, Ley?
It's certainly not an official title. It's not actually one I've given myself, but my appearance lends itself toward that sort of a term.
Well, I went on the Saskatchewan Lego users group, otherwise known as Slug.
Yes,
I went on that
website.
Right, of which you are most certainly not given all the things you're involved in. But in the little humorous bio there, it also referred to you as the Yoda of Lego.
That, again, was given to me by somebody else. Again, in terms of just encouraging people in a different way, you know. Certainly in creating things with Lego, people will come up against all manner of difficulties or stumbling blocks. I mean, I certainly do myself. And
Stumbling blocks, no pun intended.
Yeah, or an inadvertent pun, but I'll take credit for it.
Right. Okay. But
what I do is it revolves around use of puns.
Right. But build it, you must.
Sure. Indeed. And often just to lateralize one's thinking to get around whatever difficulties one might be having. Think of it in different ways. Turn the bricks on their side or whatever, and you'll maybe find a new way through. So I mean, again, that was somebody else referring to me, not my own.
Okay. All right. Well, they're pretty good. They're pretty good handles as far as I'm concerned to have.
I happily wear them. That's not a problem.
Good. Let's go back in time. Where did you grow up?
I born in Lethbridge, but grew up from the age of 4 in Saskatoon. Moved here to Meacham almost 20 years ago now. So Saskatoon to here. Not a farm kid at all.
No.
My first experience driving a tractor was well in my 30s in Apple Country in BC. So.
Oh, right. And because somebody brought you along for the ride, or were you doing it with a goal in mind?
I was working in an orchard.
Oh, you were actually
I went there to work. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so, but yeah, most of my life has been spent here, in Saskatoon and then most recently Meacham.
So you did your schooling in Saskatoon and university in Saskatoon?
Yeah, I went to university there, studied philosophy and art history.
Right. And let's just jump to the chase. When did Lego come into your life? Was it as a child?
It started, and my mother is actually quite proud to tell the tale because it was, I remember it being an Eaton's box. It was, a little box of secondhand Lego that she found for my youngest brother, who's 5 years younger than me. So I would have been about 10 at the time. My middle brother and myself, having a little more familiarity facility, we got in there and built things as well. So we all worked together with that small collection. And then not long after, I got a paper route. My brother got a paper route, and so we started rolling our assets into Lego Futures.
That's a very good way of putting it.
And at that point, it was very much not a case of building the set, but gathering the pieces to build something different, something interesting. I got 3 copies of a lunar lander and 2 of an airplane that were blue, so I could build the blue castle, which seemed the closest color to stone in my, working with it.
Right.
That blue castle exists today.
Of course, there wouldn't have been computers as we know them today, so you weren't going on Amazon to find all of this.
Oh no, that was very much a case of go to the local store, the department store,
All right.
and seeing what was available and choosing from that availability. And then, of course, in those days, the Lego sets had, and they still do, they had a little catalog inside showing you what other sets were available.
Right.
And there was one that was a rocket base thing that I always wanted, and it was never there. They never got it into that particular store or any other store that I had seen. So it was very much a case of the awareness built through, at that time, essentially print media. They had their advertising in the box for the other sets. And so, but that was very much a case then for us of, these are interesting pieces. What can we do with them? And so I already had that sort of in my mind. And then the thought of going into architecture was high in my interest at that time as well. And so I saw that very much as a tool that could be used to sketch up.
Sure. When does Lego date back to?
The bricks were originally patented in 1954, and in 1958 they changed them. They're still compatible with the previous ones, but they changed the configuration to the stud and tube. So a brick made in 1958 is fully compatible with a brick made today.
And it would have been plastic in 58 as well?
They had switched to ABS in 58.
Right.
They had used celluloid acetate before that, which is a very soft, malleable, unpredictable plastic, and it would tend to warp.
Right.
So they changed to ABS. So it's been that formula, give or take, tweaking, whatever.
How did it get the name Lego?
It's from the phrase "leg godt." Is it Danish? It was Gottfried Kirk Christensen, who was the guy who came up with it, and it means play well. Latin, Latin Danish connection there to play well, and so and he actually was a pioneer in the use of in the creation of plastic toys. He had been making wooden toys, and the wooden toy factory burned down, and they built it again. And I think they had another fire or something. Anyway, they gradually suddenly realized that it was time to switch to the new way of doing things. So it was very forward thinking. They pioneered robotics in manufacture in the 70s. So it's quite fascinating, and that's all available online as well.
Right.
In terms of my interest, from 10 to about the age of 18, I was gathering and building and so on. And then,
did you start to acquire, because there are motorized components that you can add to Lego?
There were some what are called Technic sets. There were some available back in that time. I had a couple, of basic ones so I had some. I still have motors from that era. Certainly, they've become more and more sophisticated recently.
Sure. So you didn't study architecture, but
no, I didn't. I realized that at a certain point that I knew enough about building for my own purposes, and that I wasn't going to focus on just one thing for that length of time. Right. And so I went into music and theater and carpentry and so many other things that interested me. So I had a broader interest.
Right, but Lego stayed.
Well, Lego stayed, but it became we use this term in that world of the dark age, where you set it aside and you go on to more adult things or more, serious things or whatever, university and cars and girls and all those interesting things at that time.
Right.
And so at that point, yes, I parked it. But I kept the Blue Castle, especially, was on display in my living room for most of the intervening period. It was in a box for a number of years when it wasn't possible to display, but there's no hiding it away and pretending it didn't happen or anything like that.
Right.
I actually remember at one point with a very creative group of adults in theater bringing out the box and saying, "Oh, well, here's something creative. Let's see what we can do with this." And finding that they didn't have the familiarity or the common sort of background in it to really do much. It wasn't as inspiring to them, and so I put it away again. And then very close friends of ours, the kids were very well doted on by many grandparents and cousins and aunts and so on. And they had the new Harry Potter Lego, which had some of the colors that I hadn't seen from the original days. And so my interest in architecture and Lego were suddenly rekindled. So that's where I started collecting and working with it again.
Well, during this dark period, does that mean you missed the whole Star Wars?
I missed the beginning of the Star Wars period. I missed the whole classic space period.
Right.
Basically from 1978.
Right, the whole NASA series? Was it a NASA series?
There was a NASA series that came about after, basically, it was just over 20 years when I got back into it in about 2000. And by that point, there were still some NASA sets being done.
Right.
And so, interestingly, perhaps, I had been interested in architecture and castles and that sort of thing. And now these colors were available to do more realistic sort of things like that. And I very quickly started doing the spacey stuff, which tied in with the science fiction that I'd been interested in, throughout. So I make spaceships and castles and cars and landscape and so on now.
Right. Did the basic form of the brick always stay the same as far? I mean, we're familiar with the various sizes, but did they start to make curved pieces and things like?
Oh yeah, yes. There's because I have this reasonable sized collection from my youth, and then I've added to it. I've been able to compare, the difference from back when without having that sort of gradual development that if you'd stuck with it throughout, you would have seen each little new piece come along.
Right.
So yeah, there were some curved pieces. We call them macaronis. They were just in a 2x2 square. They form a curved corner.
Right.
And so there were a lot of those in that set that I coveted with the rocket ship. So
Right.
having the curves and the smooth surfaces was quite a.
This was the blue rocket ship?
No, well, it was white and black. It was a fairly typical, like U.S. rocket style.
Right. Is there stigma as an adult around playing with Lego? I mean, if you had these things displayed in your living room, did it jeopardize your dating potential?
I don't believe so. I mean, we have no control group to really base it on.
But nobody was walking and going, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me! Grow up."
No. In part because it. Not to toot own horn or anything, but it was a fairly impressive, it was 2 feet tall and quite elaborate and fantastical and so on. And so, it was not a multicolored hodgepodge lump that you couldn't tell what it was.
Right.
And the fact that it was on display and I wasn't actively playing with it, it was, whole different kind of thing. So I don't think it closed any doors for me, so to speak. And I think, there's much talk in the, modern online community, especially among people who are on the verge of contemplating the dark age, in this whole different world than what we grew up in. And so there's different sort of schools of thought about it. Well, you need to focus a bit more on studies and so on as well, as I often suggest to people, young people, especially when they see, the size of a display, is yes, you too can do this. You maybe can't do it tomorrow. You would do well to stay in school and learn a profession that pays well enough that you can have this sort of a hobby.
Right.
So,
is there an option to do this sort of thing on a career level? I mean, where does one go with that?
Well, there is now, and a lot of people have, sought the dream job of building with Lego for a living. I know many of these people. They're some close friends of mine who do that. And it varies depending on what sort of job they have, but ultimately it becomes a job.
Right.
And so it's, I know one of my friends works in the gaming company. He works developing Warner Brothers games. He's one who does the Lego component of it for their Lego games. And I think he's quite conscious of it. And so he very much keeps the work and his own pursuit separate in terms of doing something different. It can be very difficult, but certainly it can be a career.
Right.
But for the number of kids who grow up thinking, "Oh, I'd like to design for Lego," there's not many people doing that. So it's not as wide a field as, say, being a lawyer or an engineer or many other things.
Is Lego being brought into community development at all? I mean, is it useful? Hey, it's Kevin. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Just a quick reminder that the SaskScapes podcast is available for free on your favorite podcast app, or you can stream it from your browser. Check out the show notes for the link. On the SaskScapes homepage, you'll notice something new under the logo called SaskScapes Plus. You can't miss it. There's a big button saying support with a heart icon next to it. I'd love it if you could click on that button and help keep this podcast series going. When SaskScapes launched in May 2014, it was the first podcast in the province celebrating arts, culture, and heritage. In fact, you'd have been pretty hard-pressed to find any Saskatchewan podcasts. So I'd like to think that we paved the way. It's been because of your support that this podcast is now in its 9th year. Okay, that's it. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
I think it can be a very useful tool in a lot of ways in terms of, and you'll actually see this now where there are companies that use Lego in various ways for corporate retreats and brainstorming and so on and so forth. I think the world is much richer for that sort of thing now. There's a lot of different ways one can go about stuff. You can be doodling, or you can be making things with bricks, or you can be, doing a role play with the little figures, or whatever. So I think there is a potential role for it. Certainly, being as it's a versatile thing, you can do different things with. I know in terms of our museum here, yes, it's not a very old thing relative to that horse harness or that early typewriter, but it still. It has a history to it. It also has a potential for being formed into replicas of those old things in a way that, again, gets kids or, and perhaps even adults interested in relating with history in a different way, not just learn all the numbers and, what happened on what day.
Right.
So.
The adults who are involved in Lego take it very seriously. Yeah, I mean the user groups are very structured and they're I mean these are diehard Lego.
Oh yes, there's some. I mean there are some who are very very much into it. I'm pretty sunk into it myself, but.
And there are Lego user groups all around the world?
All around the world, yes. And through the magic of the internet, I know some of these people, at least online, and have met many of them in person, We have conventions that happen in various places in the world. There's many in the States. There's been one in Canada. It's sort of smaller scale happening, but I think it's growing in Canada as well.
Something happened in Moose Jaw not so long ago.
Moose Jaw was the Brixpo, which was our Saskatchewan Lego Users Group own show at the museum there, the Western Development Museum. And
Brixpo.
Brixpo.
A take on Expo.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, one tries to come up with a clever name that hasn't been used by someone else.
Right.
So that's just the one user group in a geographical location. In this case, spread out across Saskatchewan, but that's our locus. There's groups that are larger groups in different parts of Canada and indeed around the world, and they'll form around a different interest. This particular one is quite a fun group. What has happened a lot is because Lego has built trains. They've made train sets since, in fact, early in the 60s, as I understand it, and different systems that they've used for it. The most recent couple of iterations of the train system, that all works together. It's all connectable and so on. And so there are people who've gone wholeheartedly into the train, recreating the amazing detail, that they are able to create of actual trains.
And these are on rails?
These are on rails. These are Lego rails. Recently, some aftermarket companies have created their own rails because the old 9-volt metal ones are no longer manufactured. Nonetheless, there's these groups that are very focused on making the trains, and then, of course, the landscape and the towns and so on that they travel through.
What's the gauge of the rails?
It's Lego scale.
Lego has their own.
It's roughly an O gauge. I think it is. Right? Yeah, I think it's about almost 2 inches wheel to wheel. And so, what has happened in the early development of the Lego shows, where it's adult fans putting on the show, they've started by participating in model rail shows. So the model rail enthusiasts especially across North America and to whatever extent in Europe as well, have their shows where the HO and the N and the G and all those different scales are represented by people who are amazingly focused on making those details happen in those scales. And so now Lego has enough people involved, not Lego the company, but the Lego brick. There's enough people involved who put on a big display of Lego trains, and they'll put them on at the show. I think there's been some interesting, shall we say, growing pains, because of course the brightly colored Lego display will get more votes than the incredibly detailed, thousands of man hours work. Small scale, there's amazing stuff going on in model railroading as well, in terms of the detail people are able to create. In Lego, we're trying to create as much detail as we can, given the limitations of the brick. So what will often happen is that brightly colored display will win the public's acclaim for the show. Right. So that can rub a few people the wrong way. But ultimately, it draws more people to the train show, and more kids are involved. And, it gives them a chance to see what else is possible.
Yeah, these are all voted on, yeah?
These are all, those are the votes by the public. And so, some shows have done what I think is a smart thing. It's out of scale, so that's a different category.
Right.
And so there could be more than one Lego display competing against each other, and it's not competing against a fascinating detail, end scale display.
But there are official judges that go around, and are there awards?
The different shows do it in different ways, but yeah, there are awards, there are plaques, and so on and so forth. So anyway, that's one thing that's brought the Lego hobby further out into the public, in terms of people putting on sometimes massive displays. A Lego Train Club could easily, in our case, the Saskatchewan Lego Users Group, we regularly put on roughly an 8 by 40 foot Lego layout with towns and mountains and switching yards and trains. There's one guy who's amazing at the technical stuff. He does a cargo transfer station, where he's got a device that will lift the cargo off the truck, move it over, and set it onto the train, and you've got to control it. And it's not an easy thing to operate either. So, there's there's all manner of different ways one can approach it.
Is it interesting to know how many bricks go into a display? I mean, do they?
That's the one question we get the most, and
I'm
that's
sure
the
you
one
do.
question we least have the answer for.
Yeah. No, I mean, one wouldn't know, but I mean, does one care, I guess?
Well,
in a building.
one cares when one realizes one needs a certain number of a certain piece to realize the the dream that's
Right.
imagined.
Right.
Certainly. But I mean, ultimately, as a pursuit, it's not so much about the counting. It's not so much about punching the clock.
Yeah, right.
You know.
Right.
But certainly that's something people want to know, and so we'll ballpark it and come up with ideas, and roughly this much. You can certainly count the number of studs on the top of the plates and get some sense of how many square whatever is being covered by this.
So does size matter in Lego? Or are there such things as miniatures that get a lot of attention?
That's an interesting question, and yes and no is the answer. Certainly, anything that's big gets more attention. That's an inevitable sort of thing. Oh, how big is it? Well, it's 6 feet long. Oh my goodness, that's huge. Or it's 8 feet long, or whatever. And so, I mean, in terms of comparing things, we tend to talk about the measurements for sure. One of the things I pride myself on is doing things that are interesting and unique with, say, 2 pieces. And that's not necessarily something that you show to the public and say, hey, look what I did. But certainly amongst our peer group of Lego builders, we'll show off, hey, did you know these 2 can fit together like this?
Is this Lego minimalism?
In a sense, yeah. Well, another nickname a friend of mine came up for me was Johnny Minimalism. Because I've done a few of these little, what if you put these 2 together? One of my favorites that is it got a very very enjoyable response from a few of my friends. It was using a hairdryer from one of the girl sets from the mid 80s, I guess. It's a hairdryer. And I noticed the size of the little slot on the front of the hairdryer. There's a magic wand piece that can be held in a minifig's hand. So it's a magic wand with a little star on the top. Well, it turns out that star will fit just perfectly in the slot in the front of the hairdryer. So it looks like a little, laser pulse with a little muzzle flash going on. And so because the spelling of my name confuses people, I call it the Ley gun. So we have fun things like that, and certainly I'm not the only one doing that by any stretch. So for some of us, the Lego hobby is multifaceted. There's people who are very much into the detail in the trains. There are those who are into making spaceships or moon bases or old castles. So they're very focused on the medieval, either in the being realistic or in the fantasy sort of approach to it. So, but there's some of us who are very much fascinated by the piece itself. And okay, it's called this, whatever the name might be. It's referring to its original function. What else could it be? And if I put 5 of them together, what could that become? And so there's that sense of repurposing the shape into something else that it could be.
If you're enjoying this episode of SaskScapes, why not download the entire series for free from the iTunes Store? Simply search for SaskScapes by SaskCulture. And while you're there, feel free to support SaskScapes by giving us a star rating or writing a review. From time to time, I'll share some of the comments in upcoming episodes. And who knows, it could be your comment I read next. And now, back to the podcast.
Have you married your love of art history with Lego in any way? I mean, is it crass to consider trying to replicate a painting with Lego? Can you do that?
It's been done for certainly, yeah. There are at least a couple of copies of the Mona Lisa done as a Lego mosaic. I, as a fan of all things Lego, I think those are wonderful. I don't see them as art per se, but there's very much, I think, a focus on trying to get building in Lego to be perceived as an artistic endeavor. I don't know if it matters how it's perceived. I feel it is to whatever extent, in my own approach to it. But the funny thing is, to make it be most recognizable as art, you have to copy a piece of art.
Right.
Here's a piece of art made out of Lego, as in here's a car made out of Lego. Whereas I think that there's some amazing artistic things created that are not referencing that's, any specific work of art. It's already understood to be a work of art, and people doing things that are fascinating in and of themselves, in a way that provokes all the sorts of feelings that a painting or a sculpture might do.
Age range of a Lego user group?
Age range of a Lego user group, generally they're adult Lego user groups, and I'll come back to the reasoning on that in a moment, but it will range from people in their 19, 20, all the way up to, there are fewer of us into our 50s now. There's certainly a large, collection of people within the 30s to early 40s. Just in terms of how career arcs go and where they're at in terms of being able to no longer being a student and having a stable employment sort of thing, will start collecting in whatever way. Some people sort of wake up from their dark age and collect a bunch before they realize other people are doing it, and then there's others who kind of discover a little bit online and get caught up in that. Like I said before, it's a much different world than what we grew up in. I was the only person who still built things out of Lego when I was 18 that I knew about in my circle of friends and or school and or neighborhood. Now there's a whole different thing where you can actually know that there are people building with Lego because they're in the same group. They're connected, within a town or within a city or within a region, or you find your way into one of many websites that people interact with each other from all around the world.
Yeah, you do it in real time together. You get on webcam and build.
I'm sure that's been done. I know with a couple of my friends, we've chatted on internet relay chat. Open up a channel and talk. There's a few of them out there. And one of the things that we will do is, part of the thing is having the common vocabulary, knowing what each piece is called, and knowing how to describe them. And so it's actually kind of a fun challenge to see if you can describe something to your friend in a way that he knows what you're talking about and can build it. So we've had some verbal collaboration in terms of making things where one of us might have certain pieces to hand and say, does the ray gun piece fit this at this angle, or will it not? And so it's almost like we're each kind of research lab people doing our thing and collaborating in various ways. So there can be that kind of thing. I'm certain some people have done some webcam sort of Skype collaboration in that way. What we generally do, whether it's within a lug or gearing up for an event like a Brixpo or a BrickCon in Seattle, where I'll be heading in the first week of October, where we'll set up certain standards of what is it we're doing. What does the landscape look like? It's so many plates high, it's a layer of brown over top of a layer of green, or whatever it is. In terms of doing a train layout, standard track spacing from the edges of a plate and spacing apart, we'll say, okay, the front row of plates will have the train track, and then the next 32 by 32 piece will be the road plates. And so then we can collaborate on a larger layout, knowing where the connection points will be, and then the rest is quite open to your own interpretation and so on.
How do you travel when you go to these things with your pieces? Or do you build on? You don't build on site always.
No, very rarely build on site. In fact, like I like to say, it's entirely modular. It breaks down into very small pieces. Right. But one tends to work within Lego comes in base plates of various sizes. There's 32 by 32 studs or 48 by 48, which is roughly 15 inches square. So what we'll tend to do is try to work within that 15-inch square, and then those pieces will connect with another one. So I'll maybe do 6 of those, and then my friend will do another 6 of those that connect next to it. And so we've determined what the height is that they connect at and what color it is and so on. So we can very easily create a lot of landscape that no one person has done. We've all worked together on it, and then somebody's got some buildings there and someone else uses that. We'll post images online to say, here's what I'm working on. Oh, well, that's it. Gives me an idea. I'll work on this,
But what you are traveling with, do you check these into the belly of an airplane?
There's much discussion in the world about what this one do. Certainly with the increased travel restrictions we've had over the past 10 years, it's become more difficult for those who are flying. What people will often do, because of the way baggage can be handled, they will put their clothes under, and they will carry their creations neatly bubble wrapped in a bag in their carry-on luggage. So their carry-on is whatever they're bringing.
That must raise some eyebrows in the scanners.
It can do, although it's certainly less dense than your laptop, or your headphones in your bag. Right? Yeah. So one packs as tightly as one can and breaks it down into manageable pieces. If you have a small car or a spaceship or whatever, the best thing to do is break off the pieces that are going to come off anyway, and put it all in a Ziploc baggie and pack it. Right. And then when you get to the other end, some assembly required, but you've got all the pieces in one. We've actually done situations. One we had a fellow who was very much part of the community online, and we're actually looking forward to meeting him when he finally came to one of these events. He was killed in an accident. And so, it was just tragic. Young father of 2 kids. And so there was a memorial fly-in, a particular style of spaceship that he used to make. He's a very inventive, very creative person. We interpreted that style. And so we did a memorial fly-in. Did a sort of a missing man formation of them all laid out on a table. And so some people, we did, there's an event in Chicago and one in Washington, D.C., and one in Seattle. And so one of our members coordinated it for each of those places. And I was able to go to the one in Chicago and the one in Seattle. And so, but there were people who had shipped in a box their creation from Germany and Japan and Brazil, all over the world. People, contributed in whatever way. So very often we would get, here's the bag. And if you're lucky, there's a photo that they posted online and reassemble it based on in some cases, just a best guess.
Must be a bit like labeling fossils when you're at an archaeological
I would imagine, perhaps. Yes. Right. Ultimately, it's all rebuildable.
Right. Is that cello piece that you showed me in the photo one of the larger pieces you built?
Yes. That piece, I work with a fellow who's a Lego certified professional. He is one of those people who has a special relationship with the Lego company. And so that's his official title. And basically they draw on his ability to do events that they can't provide a Lego master builder from their own internal system to do. So one of the gigs that he gets, he's allowed to search out his own gigs as well. But there was some corporate event in Vancouver several years ago where he had to create skyline of Hong Kong in a very short period of time. Wow. So that was one of his gigs. As a result of that, and we've met and collaborated a bit before. He was regularly coming to the Children's Festival here in Saskatoon. And this one year he was unable to attend, and so he called me up and said, "Could you possibly do this? I'll send my brick, but you do the thing." And so we worked out arrangement for that. The next year, they came back to both of us and said, "We'd like to have you both do this." Is their way of doing that. So since then, the two of us have done a couple years of the Lego tent at the Children's Festival. And so those are they're what are called Duplo. That's the larger Lego made by Lego, and they're completely compatible with the regular bricks. And we actually use the regular bricks to fill in when we're doing a mosaic to get more detail in the pixels, right, so to speak. Right. And so that's the one you've seen in the picture.
Is it a cello or double bass? Or
it could be a double bass,
right?
Yeah,
or a larger than life cello.
Yes, exactly. The particular theme for this year was sounds like fun, and so we determined that there was a corporate sponsor for that particular tent, so we made sure to include their logo. The Agrium logo is on the big bass drum. So we decided we'll make instruments. So we collaborate by talking out what can we accomplish, what can we do in this 4-day period, while we have kids come and build with the random brick as well. So yeah, we just. He brings 2 shipping pallets worth of Duplo in various colors, and we set to it. We built the big drum, which is about, I'm going to say, 4 feet in diameter, by a little over a foot deep. And then we built a player piano, and he built sort of a Dr. Seuss kind of a horn thing that kind of connected all the instruments. And I built this saxophone and a bass.
It actually has a name, that instrument, in Seuss language.
I can't remember either.
Yeah. The kids in the museum here get to see your pieces well, right?
Yes, they do.
And they're part of the rotating exhibit, or you just bring them up?
What we've done is put a couple of pieces, one collaboration I did with the fellow I told you about who's working with Warner Brothers now, and then pieces I've done for the Lego Users Group, Saskatchewan Lego Users Group. Displays. I'll put together some of that sort of stuff, set up a little train loop, let the kids play with that as well. And then we've got a supply of Lego for the museum that the kids can use as well. So help them kind of with some technique sort of thing as well. But to lead them through an exercise of making a vehicle or making a face or whatever, that sort of thing. So
do they look at you and think your cool factor is just through the roof that you're involved in this?
I'm guessing so.
I'd have to ask them, I guess.
Yeah, you'd have to ask them. They seem pretty excited about it all, for sure.
Right.
I try to make as much of what I produce available for them to see as well. But of course my focus is as much on amusing myself and my peers as it is creating things for a broader audience. Right. Certainly the Children's Festival stuff is wonderful to work with very basic brick. You're not using any specialized pieces, and you're having a chance to do this with a whole lot of people involved, in terms of the kids get to build things, and you can kind of coach them, help them with it a bit, or ask them what they'd like to build. We're doing this thing about sounds this year. Sure. And you see the sock monkeys in there. Those are a mascot that was drawn on the poster, for the festival. So we make it out of Lego to tie it all in. So,
what do you and other peers in lug groups think of the? I'm hesitating to ask you this question because I know you've been asked it. The Lego Movie.
Oh, it's great fun.
Yeah. Good. It got a stamp of approval.
Oh, absolutely,
absolutely.
Good. Well, it was fun for so many reasons. One little bit of fun that we have is watching the credits at the end. I know that guy. I know that guy.
Because they would have been involved.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
Consultants and
a couple of them are on their online handle. So my friend Chris, you'd have to know that that's his online handle.
Wow. Wow.
And there was a bit of a call out to the community in terms of anybody have anything interesting that might be included, give us a call kind of thing. So a lot of people really jumped on that. And there's some amazing stuff in there. I've seen the film a couple times now, and I have the DVD, of course, and I have to watch it in slow motion. There's so many.
Yeah, I'm sure
there are so many in jokes in that. They really put the effort in, and everybody involved seems to have had a chance to put little gags in that. For those of us on the inside, so to speak, they're hilarious. And there's enough gags. My wife is not a builder. She's peripheral to the fandom, but she's familiar with certain things. She really enjoyed it, just without all the specialized detail, to be gleaned for. It's one of those movies with something for everyone. It's like the old cartoons where my dad was always laughing, but he wasn't laughing at the same stuff I was laughing at. When we watched the Bugs Bunny or whatever.
Classic.
Yeah,
there's a whole other adult theme.
Oh yeah, exactly. Speaking of adult, that brings me back to the thing about adult fans of Lego and being Lego users group being for adults. One of the things, in some groups, they get together for a drink every now and then. So it's very clearly an adult thing.
Right.
Ultimately, Lego being something that's a children's toy, it's really for everybody. They used to have the name, the age range on the box would say 8 to 80.
Right.
And I don't know why they stopped that.
Talk to me about the therapy behind Lego. It seems to me that it can be quite a catharsis working with Lego.
Oh, absolutely. I think it is exactly what you said. It has a very real function in the life of many of us who work with it. That actually working with the brick is very much a way to focus, a way to give your hands to do something, to work through things that are in your mind. We talked earlier about a fellow who had died in a car accident. I lament that I never got to meet him, as he had a very profound effect on me. But I think an important thing in all that is the response within the community, and it's very much a community of people scattered around the globe who relate on a very deep level about a few things that we have in common. And so, it's helped us work through grieving in terms of thinking about, what he would have done and how he would have approached this particular building problem or whatever. And so, it's been we've been supportive of each other in dealing with that sort of thing. I actually started in the online group. I'd already come out of my dark age and was doing some building and paying attention to what was going on online. When another fellow, this is 2003, I think, Christmas time, this fellow who was quite interested in what he was doing, and felt like I was almost part of the conversations he was having with others as well. And, quite an entertaining individual. And he passed away at Christmas time. And I realized at that point that this is, what I want to do. And so if you're going to be part of it, be part of it. So I joined up the online group and became, part of that banter and that conversation and that collaboration, which has led to me traveling to many places for events and meeting these people in person and, sharing the camaraderie we have. But it's certainly, like I say, it's really helped us deal with grief. Some of these friendships I've developed first online and then in person, they're the best people. They're stand-up people. They've got your back. I remember I was actually online interacting with some of my friends when I got the phone call that my father had passed away, and they were the most supportive, encouraging, helpful, people. I wouldn't have known who to turn to, and they were there for me. And so we help each other as members of this community, and it's a very, like I say, a very real community based around a common interest, but nonetheless a community. And I think there's learning in that for people in the real world as such to be able to see that we have these different connections and support systems and so on that are out there.
So while there is an undeniable element of whimsy to Lego, there's also a very serious component to it.
Absolutely. We take it seriously. For me, coming at it from a humorous perspective, I like to illustrate puns and so on, create things that are amusing to at least myself and certainly a certain number of others. Humor is serious business, and it helps us to cope with the difficulties in life. And so, that's another piece of it. It's all part of the big puzzle.
You mentioned your wife, who's been a guest in the series. That would be Flo Frank.
Yes.
I am told that I simply must also talk about one of your other creative outlets, and that would be as a musician.
Right. Yes. Indeed.
When did that become a part of your life?
That became part of my life about a little after the Lego did.
What was the first instrument you picked up?
First instrument I picked up, I had a year of piano lessons and absolutely hated it. It was just not my cup of tea.
There's a large group of people that could join you in that sentiment.
Indeed.
Right.
We had a piano in the house, and it was very strict that you don't get to make a sound on it without lessons. So, of course, we had lessons. And then that kind of fell by the wayside. Certainly, I learned certain things there that stuck with me. And then my younger brothers each had a chance to do a band instrument in school, and I never really expressed any interest whatsoever until grade 10 or 11, grade 10, I guess. I was paying more attention to music and figured, I could get into the bass guitar. So I talked to my parents, and they said, well, your brothers had a chance, so we'll give you a chance as well, and we'll, rent you an instrument. As it turned out, they couldn't rent one, so I put half my allowance in, and Dad covered the other half, and so I got my first bass guitar. And then with the cassette deck I had at the time, I started recording. And so music and recording were tied together from that point onward. I used to jam with a friend who was a guitarist. He wasn't always available when I wanted to do something, so I picked up the guitar as well and just carried on from there. So ended up with 2 cassette decks, a pair of microphones and speakers, doing the overdubbing, moving things closer or farther. You have to mix as you go. There was so much to do then. I basically became self-taught musically from that point, having had a bit of piano. In university, I took a course sort of more in the nuts and bolts of music. It was not quite the classical appreciation course, but it was, so I learned tonic solfa system, and so I was able to apply that. But so I latched onto that. I did a lot of, book reading, and I did a lot of just picking up the instrument and seeing what was possible. And so from there, I've grown to play anything with strings.
And genre of music?
Again, genre more toward, it's hard to describe now, but more towards sort of rootsy on the acoustics, sort of psychedelic on the electrics, sort of. I listen to a lot of different kinds of music and find myself having difficulty defining the genres sometimes myself. So.
You and Flo together in 1995 founded a recording studio. Company,
recording
Eon?
studio. Yeah, Eon Music. It's been a studio and a label as such. Although we certainly are amateurs in the label department. We've released a number of things.
With Saskatchewan artists.
With local artists. We recorded them in our studio and got to the point of here's 1,000 CDs. I did the graphic design for the covers as well. So we've done a bit of that. Not maybe as much as we imagined we would, but there are so many pursuits that come up in one's world.
Right.
It's been quite a fun thing. We started to turn this building into a studio. We did some recordings here. The first Little Miss Higgins is probably the one most recognizable to people. In fact, in order to help pay for the recording, they helped us paint the building.
Oh, wow.
So,
wow, it's a good acoustic space, yeah?
It's a really nice space.
When the trucks aren't driving by.
When the trucks aren't driving by.
So what's the majority of your day comprised then? Musician, Lego? I mean...
Well, at this point, it's hard to say because a lot of it becomes seasonal. Okay. Certainly, building with Lego is a winter pursuit for me because I can't go outside and do the outside things I might do. Right. Music can be a year-round thing, although it again might not get as much attention in the summer. It depends. Mostly, what happens now is I'll work on particular projects. Right, so recording a local band of young musicians, very talented, called Boomlag. We're at the mastering stage now in their recording. So I'll find what time in my schedule works best for doing that kind of work.
You're on the island, Vancouver Island, often?
More so now, yeah.
Right, we're doing something artistic?
One hopes. Working toward a studio there as well. So my interest in acoustics and in architecture and building means that I have a certain skill set that really applies well to that sort of thing. I actually have had use for Lego in various ways in the studio. Some of the larger hollow rock pieces make a very good shaker with a few smaller pieces inside of them. You get some interesting tones there that are different again from a wooden shaker or a gourd or whatever. So in that way, one of the things I do a fair amount when I'm using a keyboard, I'm often doing a pad, a tone, whatever going on underneath. And that can be really boring to hold that chord down for the period of time that the piece is needing it. So I've made little armatures or structures out of brick so I can set particular, put the spacing so it lands on the right keys and then put a brick on top and then put weight on top of that so that it, I can have a tone playing while I'm doing something else.
Oh, right. So you're not just relying on looping.
No, it's actually play that in real time and then manipulate. So instead of playing the keyboard, I'm playing the effects in the studio on that. There's that use for the Lego for sure. I find that we've discussed earlier, and that's a whole big kettle, whether Lego can be art, whether Lego can be used for art or a medium. I see Lego as music as well, in the real sense of you can use it to create music, different tones. There's actually a fellow who built a harpsichord out of Lego.
No kidding.
A fellow named Henry Lim.
Strings and all?
The strings are not Lego.
Right.
The majority, it's a playable harpsichord.
And it plucks.
Yeah. It's the fellow's name is Henry Lim. You can look him up. Wow. Lim. So it is possible to use it to create music. But also I see some of the things that people create and some of the focus that I take in creating something is seeing it as a theme and variation sort of thing, to actually the repetition of elements becomes like a rhythmic thing and so on. So I see it in a musical sense as well. But outside of that, it's very much that I create music in a certain way, and that I create Lego in a different way, and the two are sort of complementary to each other for the most part, other than what I just said.
Right.
That sometimes working out a spatial problem in brick is a good way to change up my thinking before I go back into solving a harmonic problem in music.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Right.
And I think the other piece, I'm not sure if Flo mentioned, to maybe tie some of this together, is my other pursuit musically is in theater.
You mentioned that yourself.
Yeah.
Tell me about
Yeah.
that.
So I've had the good fortune to work with Angus Ferguson, Dance's Guy Theater.
Dance's Guy, yeah.
Yeah, and his focus for the sound in plays is to have live musician as part of the show. The way we work is to do what I call live soundtrack. And so when I've done music in the show, it's been very much around supporting the action. And in some instances, covering for a change in, the scene change and that sort of thing. But a lot of it is taken from a very much soundtrack perspective. And the time that you feel the most success is when somebody doesn't notice that there was music. Because that means they're so caught up in the show that it was all part of it and it didn't stand out, it didn't jar. So there's another approach musically in that's quite different from, banging away three chords saying, "Hey, look at me."
It's like a soundtrack to live theater.
Exactly. And so with all the potentials and the pitfalls that can occur with that as well, but there's very much, it becomes a very organic thing. And so you're breathing with the actors and working, with their rhythms, and sometimes throwing them something that they can, lean on, so to speak. So that's been a major musical focus for me over the past couple of decades.
Right. You strike me as the kind of person that has to work from a very creative place, no matter what it is that you do. It's just part of your DNA to work creatively.
Yeah, exactly. Improvisation is a huge piece. And once a play is set, you're doing the same quote unquote thing each night, but you're working with subtle variation within that. But the process leading to that is pure improvisation. It's very much a case of I want to be there from the first read through to hear the voices of the actors and hear what might fit around them, what might come in, what might be needed in it, and then that's working with the rehearsal process to get to a point of this piece works.
Right. But as far as you move through life creatively, all these aspects of your life reek of creativity, which seems to be the only real way you know how to function is from a very creative place, which is great.
Yes, I suppose so. I'm very much, I approach many things from the sense of, so what does this sound like? What sounds can this create? In the sense of finding a brick and saying, what else could this be? How can I create a different form with it? One of my interests in Lego is making a dodecahedron out of Lego, which is using angles that most people think of it as one brick on top of another, and that's it. There's a vast world in there.
There's a through line with all of my guests as I meet them, and already I'm wanting to introduce you to to Weldon Gray because he utilizes that pattern in making lutes. He's a lute maker in Saskatoon.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And he utilizes that exact pattern.
Right. Well, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Does Saskatchewan have its own sounds?
Oh, absolutely.
Unique sounds?
Absolutely. They're. I mean, living here, there's one now.
There's the creaking door of the Meacham Museum.
There's an amazing soundscape here. That's one of the nice things about being this far from the city. We hear traffic on the road, and we hear a plane going by and all that sort of stuff. But we hear the wildlife, significantly. We hear the frogs in the summer. It can be almost deafening when you're out front. Like we're just a block from the pond where they live. Right. And then you'll find them in our yard too. Songbirds, just there's some magical moments. The cranes flying over. Just run outside and want to listen to them and see them and so on. Right. There's also a wonderful thing that happens here, and I understand it to be a very rare thing in the world in general. I've been a few places where this is possible, but to step outside on a very calm night and hear nothing. To the point that you kind of make a sound to check if your ears have, maybe I've gone deaf for a moment or something, and just to have that as a one end of the scale that's possible here, that's huge. And you realize that any sound can come out of that. So it really does provide a blank slate musically, if you want it. You can start with nothing. Is there wind? Is there a dog in the distance? Is there a bird?
Right.
Is there rustling in the trees? All those sorts of things come out of that. So that's a wonderful, wonderful sort of backdrop to being able to create sound in theater and create music and
because we often know visually what stimulates us about this province, but I don't know how many of us take the time to think about what sounds stimulate us.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And certainly, I've created percussive instruments out of broken pieces of farm machinery. So, there's that sort of the metallic sort of thing. There's sounding stones. There's all sorts of, there's a wealth of sound here for sure. For sure.
It's a very cool life you're living.
I think so. I feel truly lucky and blessed to be here now doing what I do, for sure.
And I can see you and Flo working in tandem with each other as if very like-minded.
Right. And again, luckiest guy in the world to have someone like her. Her encouragement and support have been immeasurable.
I believe she feels the same way.
Right.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I've been hearing about this Lego wizard for a very long time, and it was kind of hard to track you down for a while. And
wizards aren't out on the high street with their little sign up.
You are in fact the second wizard in my series. So,
excellent!
You are in good company, but you're a bit of an anomaly that I've heard about, but wasn't quite sure whether it really existed or not. And to the seriousness with which you take your Lego is quite something. It's a very unique addition to this series.
All right. Okay. Well, anomaly works for me.
Okay. Great.
Thank you very much. Very good to meet you.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. The SaskScapes podcast is created by Kevin Power as part of the Culture Days Animateur program operated by Sask Culture. Funding to the cultural sector is provided through the Saskatchewan Lotteries Trust Fund for Sports, Culture and Recreation. If you want to hear more of these podcasts, or to see the great work being done by other Sask Culture animateurs, please visit www.iheartculture.ca. Special thanks to Paved Arts in Saskatoon for their technical support. Music for SaskScapes is provided by Saskatchewan-born singer-songwriter Jeffrey Straker. There is no end to the stories to be told. So, until next time,